What's going on, everyone? I am Double D, and welcome to the Double D post-race review. The NASCAR Cup Series race at Pocono Raceway in Long Pond, Pennsylvania would be an exciting one, with some different types of strategies and different types of chaos, as Denny Hamlin would be the pole sitter, obviously, winning that race 7 times. He would start up front, and he would lead all the way to stage 1. Saucier would be in the top 5 most of the time, but he had an insane save. It was a wonder he didn't crash, but he kept it going, and that's how stage 1 went. It was caution-free. But before stage 1 would end, you would see other cars that are way outside the bubble would pit to try to win the race before the end of stage 1, like Brad Keselowski, who was below 30th in points, Ty Gibbs, and Carson Hocevar. You'd have some drivers try to take gambles on strategy to try to get ahead. And that's what Keselowski tried to do, as he would lead the restart. After the restart, Brad Keselowski would lead some of stage 2, but there had become a trend where 2311 cars would have problems. 2 of them, being Riley Earps and Bubba Wallace, would blow right front tires and hit the wall with issues with their brake rotor. Tyler Reddick, the driver of the 45, would have concern about the brake rotor and would go behind the wall for a couple of laps, but eventually go back on track. But that would still cost him the chance of winning his race. Those 2 incidents would obviously bring out cautions, and that would let some cars play strategy of staying out, and that's what the Penske cars did. Joey Logano would lead a couple of laps, but Alex Bowman would take the lead from him, and there'd be more trouble that would happen. The more trouble would be drivers with right front issues. One of them being Michael McDowell, where he would blow it right in the front of the straightaway, and he would have to pit. Somehow it didn't bring a caution, and Alex Bowman would still lead. But I still believe it did bring out a caution, because there was debris 2 laps later. And that would mix strategy once again, as now rivalries would come into play, where Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Carson Hocevar would be side by side for the restart. Man, them 2 just cannot get away from each other. But anyway, you could tell when Carson Hocevar was trying to race Ricky Stenhouse, he was a lot more cautious. But I doubt if Stenhouse is going to wreck Carson Hocevar at a high-speed track. But with all that chaos going on, eventually Chase Briscoe would take the lead. But then there was a 4-car accident towards the back, as it involved Ty Dillon, Christopher Bell, Kyle Busch, and SVG. And once again, Kyle Busch was involved in another accident. This man cannot get a break to save his life. Somehow, all those cars would continue, but Brad Keselowski and his team made a silly mistake. They were trying to pit before the end of stage 2, so that way they'd have an advantage of track position, but instead, Brad Keselowski's teammate Jeremy Bollins called Brad Keselowski into pit whenever the pit road was closed. Usually there's like a red light on that you're able to see before you go into pit road. Somehow Keselowski or the crew chief did not see that, and that would end up costing them the race, which they would get a penalty and they'd be sent to the back. And then the restart would go on, and Chase Briscoe mainly kept the lead. It was really hard to pass for the lead with all the dirty air, but he would win stage 2. Chase Briscoe would lead the start of stage 3, as this would be the longest stage of the race and also the last stage of the race, and where there were strategies that'd still be in play, because there was other drivers that pitted a little earlier or later in the last stage, and that would take in play. So Chase Briscoe would pit, and of course all the leaders would pit, but the ones that pitted a little later before the stage end were trying to extend the run, so that way they would be able to make it on fuel and have fresher tires, which one of those ended up being Brad Keselowski. Making a mistake in stage 2, he was trying to bounce back, trying to gamble, trying to stay out as long as he can. And that did not work for him, because he got bad luck as SVG would spin and bring out the caution. Before that caution would come out, however, Chase Briscoe had the fastest pit stop, but the twist was he had less fuel. And he got a report from his crew chief before the final restart that they did not have enough fuel to finish the race. They were 3 to 4 laps short. But Briscoe would still have the lead on the final restart, and somehow saving fuel and holding off one of the best drivers in Pocono in Denny Hamlin, and extended his fuel tank to the finish to win at Pocono. And now we go ahead to take a look at the top 10 finishers. Obviously, Chase Briscoe won the race. Denny Hamlin came second. Ryan Blaney came in third. He was moving his way through the field, and what was more impressive about that, He had the problem in his cooling system where he could not cool off in the car, and he was having a race in the extreme heat, and he was still got a third place finish, and he was exhausted after had that finish. And you got Chris Buescher finishing 4th, Chase Elliott, my favorite driver, finishing 5th. Second week in a row, he's got a top 5. I'm hoping he's keeping that momentum so he can get the win. And Legacy Motor Club having another great run. John Nemechek in 6th. They're going to be in contention for a win soon, I believe. Kyle Larson had a rough day, but he was still able to get 7th place. Ryan Preece, Roush car, looking great. Not 8th place. So is Keselowski. He could have won the race today. I think he had the second best car compared to Hamlin, but of course the silly mistake in stage 2 and strategy not going their way in stage 3 cost him this race, but he was still able to make it all the way back up to 9th. And then Austin Cindric was able to get a 10th place finish. And now a look at the playoff standings, as we got another new winner, but he wasn't below the cutoff line this time, so it didn't really affect the bubble that much. But now Alex Bowman has a 20-point gap on Ryan Preece for that last playoff spot. And now it is time for the interview. For the second week in a row, I'll be interviewing a random NASCAR fan, and also another league member of mine. His name's Jakob Saucier, former cross-country runner, and he's a very passionate NASCAR fan. And here is the interview. Welcome to the Double D podcast, Jakob. Pleasure to have you on here. You're another NASCAR friend of mine. But tell my audience more about you.
Hey, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad to be your second honorary member of the podcast. Should have been the first, but it's fine. I will hold it. I'm Jakob. I'm from Maine, 23. Been a fan of NASCAR since I was probably like 10 years old. Really started getting into it around probably like 16, 17. Favorite driver currently, Young Money, Kyle Larson. Been a fan of him since he was in the 42. In my spare time, I like to run. I'm an avid runner. For some reason, I like to do it for fun, which people call me crazy for, but, that's me.
Interesting that you're a runner, because I was a runner for a couple of years, but wasn't the best runner, obviously. But hearing that you were a runner, did you do cross-country, or did you do track and cross-country?
I did all of them.
Oh, all of them?
Yeah, I ran indoor track, outdoor track, and cross-country.
Nice. What was the most difficult thing about running or trying to prepare for a race?
I would say consistent training was definitely the toughest part. Not injuring yourself in the process, because at times I'd be running like 10 miles a day. It's a big strain on your body. But in my prime, I wouldn't say I'm in my prime now, but in my prime days of running, I was able to run sub 16:30 in the 5K. I ran a 4:37 mile, and my best 2 mile was a 10:16. So.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I tried to train for. I could only do really like 3 miles. I could only work on that when I first begun, and I understand it's really difficult, especially during the summer right now when you have to get up early in the mornings, and then you got that heat, all that heat going around.
Oh, absolutely. I'm up at like 5 a.m. running, or else it's impossible.
Yeah. I'm glad those days are over for high school, though. I run like a mile, 2 miles a week, so.
Yeah, well, now it's just running for fun for the most part. I kind of just run whatever race I want to. So, like, I ran a half marathon recently, as you're aware, for the first time. I did pretty well, so.
What's been your best result?
My time was 1 hour and 28 minutes and 4 seconds. I placed 48th out of over 3,200 people.
That's pretty cool. Not very many people are able to match that time.
Yeah, no, it hurt a lot. I didn't even think I was going to run that fast, but it was a good time for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely impressive.
It's a big mental thing to be able to keep yourself running a good pace for that long.
Okay. So back to NASCAR, that subject. So, I heard you were a Larson fan back when he was in the 42 car. How and when did you get into NASCAR, and when did you started liking Larson?
So, the earliest NASCAR memory I have I was probably like 8 years old, and my mom bought me two 164 diecast. She bought me one of Dale Jr. and his AMP COT scheme, and then a Jimmy Johnson car. And my mom was a Dale Jr. fan, and my dad was a Jimmy fan. And I got really excited about the Junior car, and then when I opened the Jimmy car, I threw it across the room because I don't know. I just thought it was funny to be anti-Jimmy at the time. But
That's funny.
But I started. That was the earliest NASCAR memory I could think of. I was a Junior fan growing up. I went to the first NASCAR race I went to was in New Hampshire. It was 2013 or 14, I think, because Brian Vickers won.
Interesting, an underdog won that race.
I've been trying to find the diecast for that race, and it's worth so much money now because they only made like 400 of them. So it's kind of sad. But so I would say I was a Dale Jr. fan growing up, and then I loved Junior. Jimmy grew on me, and Larson, from an early age, I just remember walking through Target and seeing all of like the promotions for him, and that's when I started to be like, oh, I like this kid. And then I started watching him race. I can't remember what race it was that he won, but I remember telling my dad, I was like, this kid's going to be a champ someday. I like him a lot if he gets into it with some better equipment, and that was history.
About Larson, the race where I knew he had talent, I remember randomly watching a nationwide race in 2014. I believe it was Auto Club Speedway. I think he had that battle between Kyle Busch and Casey Kane, who were regular Cup drivers, and Larson beat both of them. And what fascinated me about him, he did a burnout without the steering wheel.
Yep.
And I thought...
Yeah, no.
And then later on that year, he had a battle with Jeff Gordon at Chicagoland.
Yep.
And I thought, man, Larson's going to be special.
But the earliest races that I can vividly remember watching on TV would be the race that made it unlimited playoff or overtime restarts between Dale Jr. and Logano, where Logano beat Jr. because it was like the 3 restarts and then the race is over type deal. I forget what race that was, but I remember that race vividly, and that made me a very strong Logano hater from there on out as a Junior fan at the time.
Oh, yeah, that 2015 race at Talladega was miserable. I bet everybody in the NASCAR world was pulling for Junior, and he was the unfortunate one to not win a championship in his entire career.
Yep.
Well, besides nationwide, but Cup Series, he's never won one.
Yeah. I would say I only started watching NASCAR during the season of Jimmy's last championship. That was probably when I really started to get into it, actually start like collecting stuff. So.
Yeah, and also I mentioned like my introduction, I've been a fan since 2012, and I witnessed 2 of Jimmy Johnson's championships, 2013 and 2016.
Yep.
So, okay, so now to the present NASCAR questions. So Pocono just happened last week. We've had Chase Briscoe win on fuel mileage. Mixed reviews on the race of Pocono. Some liked it, some didn't. Overall, what did you think about it?
I thought it was okay. I thought that the fuel strategy would play more into the race. I thought that the cautions where they fell kind of took out some people's options for fuel, especially like Brad Keselowski, who was set up to do well, had that caution, came out a lap later. Worked out for Ryan Blaney, though. I didn't mind the race. I did find that it was kind of boring at times as far as cars not being able to pass, because Denny Hamlin, for example, I would arguably say is easily the greatest Pocono driver of all time.
Agreed.
At that, he just knows that racetrack inside and out, and for him not to be able to make any gains on a driver who is fairly new to Joe Gibbs, and I wouldn't say he's statistically ever been that great at Pocono, while he's saving fuel and not even really trying, just kind of cruising up front, that's kind of crazy to me, that he just couldn't even get close enough to do anything. So I think the aero package definitely hindered the race a bit. I think if there was less aero effect on the cars, I think it would have been a little bit better of a race. But yet again, Michigan, similar style track a few weeks ago, same cars, produce phenomenal racing. So I guess it can also just kind of depend on the day as well.
Yeah, different for Pocono. There's a lot more braking and everything, and just with those Gen 7 cars, you just get stuck in that dirty air, and it's just hard to pass. Even like the best cars stall. Yeah,
exactly.
When it's still good too that Briscoe was able to hold off Hamlin though, because I mean that's still difficult to do, like holding off like one of the best Pocono drivers on fuel. Like there was a moment like that Amazon broadcast where they were saying he was like 3 or 4 laps short on fuel, but Briscoe was still able to save that much. It shows you the talent that Briscoe had, and he even muscled to 2 Cup Series wins in Stewart-Haas. And he's now showing what he can do with JGR, which is impressive.
I still think it's funny that he's gotten a win before Ty Gibbs, and Ty Gibbs had basically a 2-year head start in Joe Gibbs equipment. It's crazy to me, but
yeah,
I'm happy for him, and I'm happy for the 19 to see it back in victory lane.
That's why I'm wearing a Truex shirt today, guys. First time the 19's in victory lane.
What's I on?
Nice.
I watched Truex's last win, so to see the 19 win again is cool. And I don't know if I'm not as crazy with knowledge as far as back in like the 80s or 90s, but I don't know if any other drivers ever won in the 19 besides Truex. I could be wrong, but I can't recall anyone else winning in the 19. So that's a pretty cool stat to add his name to.
Yeah. Well, I think back in like mostly NASCAR history, the 19 was mostly like a back marker. Back when I remember, back in like 2012 to 17 until like he actually brought it back. Well, actually 18. That was when Furniture Row shut down. I think the 19 came back in 2019 for JGR.
Yep.
Okay.
I think, if you don't mind me adding, I think they're very similar drivers, like Truex and Briscoe, as far as like how they got their come up. Like they really had to muscle their way up to the top as far as driving in less equipment and doing way more with the equipment than they could to earn that ride. So it's cool to see him actually do well and actually see his work pay off. I wasn't a big fan of him back in the day, but he's kind of grown on me a little bit. So
yeah, I mean, you love to hear it, like a driver trying to work their way through all the styles of racing to get to the pinnacle of motorsport, the Cup Series. Yes, I called it the pinnacle of motorsport. F1 fans, get after me for that. But yeah, it's great to see Briscoe with that fairy tale story. Okay, so we've noticed some drivers have some issues during the Pocono race. One of them being Kyle Busch. I mean, his last Cup Series win was at Gateway in 2023. And he hasn't really had good results since. Do you think it's the equipment he's in with RCR because his teammates were not running good in Austin Dillon? Or do you think he's at the twilight of his career and he's got to retire soon?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I mean, we've seen him win in RCR equipment before. Granted, it was earlier on in the life of the next-gen car to where I found more teams were more equal because there was less knowledge to the car, whereas now I feel like the big teams have had a time to advance their knowledge on the car compared to teams with less money. But I think RCR overall is just struggling. Austin Dillon, who had that controversial win, he was still doing pretty well when Busch was doing well. And ever since Busch hasn't been doing well, you don't even see Austin Dillon on the racetrack. He's just buried back in almost dead last every week. So I think there's definitely something going on there, whether it's equipment, whether it's just team morale. I mean, I think it's a multitude of things, but it is kind of depressing to see. You see a driver who used to dominate and put fear into the competitors, somewhat similar to Earnhardt, struggle to finish a race. Kind of crazy.
Yeah, Earnhardt took him 20 years for him to win a Daytona 500. Kyle Busch still has yet to win one, and that drought has went longer. And it may have less chances with his career getting down to the twilight. Okay, so asking more questions about drivers struggling as well. So, Chase Elliott, it seems like the past couple of races, he has kind of turned around with his team. The last 2 races, he's been doing okay. Ran all the way to the top 3 in Mexico. And at Pocono, he finished top 5. It seems like he's starting to turn that around. But for mostly the beginning of the season, and arguably last year he just, in my opinion, got lucky with that Texas win. But he's just struggled to win races, and he just hasn't looked like that same driver. Do you think Chase Elliott is washed, or do you think he just doesn't have as good as equipment as Larson and William Byron, let's say?
I do say it to get on your nerves sometimes as far as calling him washed, but I don't think he's washed. I still have faith in him. He was actually kind of like my favorite driver transitioning from junior to Larson back when Larson was still kind of in mid equipment. So I do feel for you being a Chase fan as far as him having that kind of drought of winning. I don't think he's washed. I mean, if you look at the beginning of the year, he started off the season with a win. Whether or not the win counted for playoffs, I think it showed that they still have the capability of winning.
Yeah.
And I think their results, but wins might mean a lot. But if you look at where his points are right now, he's highest as far as not having a win in points, yes. So out of everybody that's won, he's first. He's like plus 160, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that. So I think his stats and his consistency still are amazing, if not one of the best as far as consistency goes. As far as just grinding it out over a race. They may not always have the best car, but he somehow finds a way to finish in the top 10 almost every week. So for that, I wouldn't say he's washed. I think they're just struggling to find that extra little bit to win, or they get edged out by their teammates, fortunately, whether it be Larson or Byron or opposing teams like Denny. Sometimes I think they just miss it on strategy just a little bit every week, and that costs them the win.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, that's for you Chase Elliott haters out there. He is definitely not washed. He has been really consistent. He just hasn't been winning. He kind of reminds me of Carl Edwards. Like, if you watch, like, Carl Edwards' close season with Tony Stewart in 2011, he only had one win that entire season. But he didn't have any DNFs, I think.
Yep.
He either had
Something
only
like
one DNF or no DNFs at all. But he was really consistent, and he lost to Tony Stewart in a tiebreaker. And that was only because it was most wins. And if it was like the Winston Cup format, Edwards would have probably been the champion instead of Stewart.
Yep. That's a topic for, but as far as champions, how the champions would have been if they stayed with the Winston Cup format, which I'm partial to. I think the Winston Cup format is peak, but anyway.
Yeah, whole argument for another podcast. But yeah, as I was saying about Chase Elliott, I think he'll get a win eventually. It's just his team's got to put a race together. Alan Gustafson and even his pit crew have been making mistakes. They got to turn it around, in my opinion. Okay.
Sometimes it's not even a huge mistake. It's just like they're just not the best on a certain strategy, and that costs them from coming out number one off pit road or number one on one strategy that ends up being the winning strategy. So.
Yeah. Okay. So, next question I got. So we're gonna move away from Pocono. That's already done in the trash bin from Sunday. What's your predictions for Atlanta? Now called Echo Park. Cringe.
Echo Park way. I don't know. That track is so weird to me now. When I think of Atlanta, I still think of old school Atlanta. So to think of it as a super speedway is just kind of weird to me. I know for our points thing that we do, I didn't pick him, but I think this is a sleeper pick, and it's a wild pick. But I think Larson could get his first super speedway win.
I mean, it is possible because Larson finished second in the last race we had at Atlanta. If it would have went green all the way, who knows who would have won that?
He's had a little bit of a slump, but I think if you look back at the last like 3 or 4 restrictor plate tracks, he's just shown a immense consistency, which is very weird for him at a super speedway track. So I think he's been working on super speedway stuff and just trying to hone his craft as far as that goes, because I think he's trying to silence the haters as far as not being able to win on one. But I think if I want to be more realistic, I think probably a Ford will steal it, just because Ford has been so dominant there, especially if you look at how many wins Joey Logano has there in the next gen. I think he has 2 at least on the new style paving. So I think it'd probably be another Ford that wins, but
Yeah, it's
anything's possible.
One thing that annoys me about plate tracks, Penske domination. Hate to see it when it's Logano, especially me. But, alright, so, yeah, in my prediction for Atlanta, I think Ryan Blaney's going to win. He, in my opinion, besides maybe Denny Hamlin, he's one of the best restrictor plate racers in the field. And he's had the best finishes overall as a restrictor plate driver. And that's why I always pick him for the restrictor plate tracks. No matter how random it gets, Blaney's usually there at the end. Okay, so
I would argue that Penske right now is one of the most well-rounded teams as far as drivers that can win. Because as far as I would consider them a 4-car team with Josh Berry. But if you think about it, if you look at all the other teams in the series, there's no other 4-car team that has had everybody win yet besides them. So
okay, so pretty much Penske cars have a history of screwing themselves because historically in the last few races you've seen them like get into it with each other. Some of them trying to work hard and then they get them involved in an accident. And you also seen that with like the Toyotas at Talladega last year. Eric Jones even got an injury because of it.
Yep.
So
I think it'll just come to whoever's in the lead in like the last couple laps because the air. I mean, I guess in Atlanta is not as bad, but I just feel like recently in restrictor plate tracks, it's just been like aero blocking to the extreme. So.
Yeah. So, okay. So, I said I'd quit talking about Pocono, but I have to talk about the NASCAR on Amazon Prime coverage. In my opinion, I thought it was the best broadcast in years. What did you think about the entire thing?
I thought it was well put together. The only thing I didn't like was that I had to buy an Amazon Prime membership to watch NASCAR. But I thought it was really well. It was nice to hear Junior in the booth again. I wish they would carry him over to all the different broadcasts because
Totally.
I just love his announcements, especially the classic slide job announcement.
Yeah.
But no, I thought that was really well. I thought that there was less bloopers compared to like Fox, where they'll just like, I don't know. I find that Clint Boyer halftime will just stumble over his words and not even be able to talk, and then you just have like, I don't know, just weird camera angles. Like I feel like just they had it a lot more honed in with Amazon, so I appreciated that as far as that goes.
Yeah. I believe the coverage was a lot more detailed as well. I won't forget I gave an iconic slide job commentary whenever they had that Charlotte race where Chastain made that pass. And also, I noticed some of like the older fans were not happy with like having to pay for an Amazon Prime subscription. But me, I know I'm young, but I do like the streaming better because the networks don't really have to get much of a demand when you're having to use like a streaming service. They're a lot less strict, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. I liked the pre and post coverage too. I think they did a good job with that, like the after party and inviting drivers in to talk to them like immediately after the race. I thought that was pretty cool to get their raw emotion on what happened in the race and like the winners. So
felt like back in the NASCAR on speed days.
Yeah. Now we just need that. You remember that woodchuck they used to have on TV that would pop up in the middle of the screen?
I do. That was hilarious. And then Jimmy Spencer with the crying towel. Funny times. All right, so another thing new that's going to start during the Cup season, not just that they're going to be on TNT, but they're also having the in-season tournament where the bracket's already created, and whoever finishes the best out of those, I think it's like 5 races, will win $1 million. Kind of similar to the All-Star race. Do you think this will make the racing more entertaining?
Potentially. When I initially saw it, the first 2 people I looked at was Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson. And then when I saw who they were going up against, I was like, how the heck did they actually pick these alignments? Because they have Denny Hamlin going against Ty Dillon for the first round. And then they have Kyle Larson against Tyler Reddick. Now, it might just not be me, but I don't find that those are very fair matchups. Could just be the Kyle Larson fan of me too, but I would consider Reddick to be a lot more of a skilled driver
Mhm.
and in better equipment. Hi, Dylan. But I do think it'll be interesting. I don't know how many teams would be willing to sacrifice, especially teams that haven't won, like focus on that over winning, like in getting into the playoffs. But you never know. Maybe like small teams will want to try to do well just so they can get some money to boost their team. But it might. I think people that have already had wins will probably try to focus on it more because they have nothing to lose. Like they're already locked into the playoffs, so if they have to do a weird strategy to beat one driver to advance to the next round, why not?
Yeah, that's really going to mix things up, but it's going to be kind of interesting to see. Are you trying to beat one driver, or are you trying to go for the win? Because the wins do matter, because it locks you into the playoffs. So they got to remember that.
Exactly.
All right, so this is the last question I got, and I usually ask this for NASCAR fans traditionally. What's your favorite 124 and 164 diecast that you own?
Ooh, that's tough. I got two top contenders for. I got two top contenders. I'll bring them over. Actually, I'll just show you. How do I do this? All right, I'm just gonna open this. So I would say two of my favorites at the moment would be Kyle Larson's championship car in the, I don't know what this like shiny one's called, but
looks like color chrome.
Yeah, color chrome. That's one of my favorites for sure. Another one, just because again, I was at the race and it was his last win, so it means a lot to me, is the Martin Truex last win car. And just the detail on it's crazy. Like it's literally even missing the tire because he blew the tire off entirely. And just like the wear and tear on the tire is crazy to me.
Yeah, that's actually impressive.
It's just a beautiful car. But I have too many of these.
Yeah, and I don't have enough.
But I'll give your viewers a sneak peek of some of the stuff I got.
Yeah, he's got a pretty sick collection. I definitely like that Jeff Gordon car at the top.
Yep. And this one is pretty cool because it's his Texas win from 21. It's not only signed by Larson, but it's also signed by Cliff. So it's pretty sweet. I have some more, but the bottom layer of the shelf right now is not organized, so it's complete chaos. It's a work in progress.
Yeah. All right, so for the 164.
For the 164. My favorite 164 is actually on a bolo tie, but it's a Kyle Larson championship car that I got him to sign in person. So I would say it's probably my favorite just because it's pretty sentimental to me. Yeah, pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. You get to wear that wherever with Larson on it.
Exactly. Plus, it's just cool too because the silver pops up really well. I was glad he had a silver marker that day. I had him sign this too, and it looks incredible to me. But
the only signature I got on a 124 is Corey LaJoie's car. I really need to upgrade.
This 99, my God, what's his name? It's a Waltrip car. I think it's Darrell Waltrip. I got that signed at a flea market, and it was literally like $20. It was the biggest W for a signed car.
Honestly, who would... Okay, no offense to them, but who would be that stupid to sell it for that much?
I don't know.
I mean, Darrell Waltrip, one of the greatest drivers in NASCAR.
It might be Michael Waltrip. I think that's who it is.
Oh, Michael Waltrip. Well, that's still a rare find.
No, yeah, exactly. Plus, it's a cool car.
Okay.
Unsigned.
Well, that is all for the interview, Jakob. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. Hope you have a nice night.
Absolutely. Thank you as well. It was a pleasure to be here. Hope you invite me back so we can have some more cool NASCAR chats.
Yes. Thank you. All right. All right, so that was some interesting takes from Jakob. And now it's time for the Double D podcast pre-race review. Brand new things are going on for NASCAR this weekend, as not only they're going to be on TNT, they're also going to have their very first in-season tournament. The in-season tournament's kind of like March Madness, but different. Bracket style it is, but the seating's different. The seating was determined by the last 3 races before the in-season tournament to determine how all the drivers would be seated. And here's my prediction for who's going to win the whole thing. Knowing that this tournament's based off of like the best finisher than the other, I believe Chase Elliott's going to win this whole thing. He's been the most consistent this entire season. Although he hasn't won the race, he has still made sure that he has gotten a great finish. And I think he can try to outscore his drivers. And the interesting thing about this in-season tournament, it's probably going to make some strategies really interesting. And are you going to try to beat the one driver, or are you going to try to win the race? And that we're going to see that starting at Atlanta. They called it Echo Park, which is a stupid name, but Atlanta Motor Speedway. It's going to be Saturday night on TNT, so I'm going to be happy to see that. And if you tuned in this long, thank you for watching the entire podcast. Of course, I'll be doing the watch party for the Atlanta race Saturday night. I'll see you guys then, and make sure you tune in for the Double D Podcast Episode 3 next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night, everyone.